Hey, do you want to know what kind of DM you are? Well, what do you think went wrong in this scenario? A party is confronted by a group of enemies. One player character pulls out their sword, and the player says, "Oh, if they try to do something, then I'm going to attack them." A bit more talking between the characters goes by, and the DM calls for initiative. That player says, "Hey, do I get a surprise round? Because I already had my weapon out." The DM will think about this for a moment and will respond, "Well, these guys were pretty ready for a fight, so I don't think so." The player dejectedly accepts and rolls initiative, rolling lowest, allowing the enemies to attack first. What mistakes were made here? You can pause the video and write out your comment if you want to. Now, the rules aren't exactly strict about what to do in this exact situation, so there's multiple ways as you, as a DM, might choose to go through this. So, let's talk about it. Firstly, what the player is asking for isn't a surprise round, but rather to ready in action. They tried to word it in a roleplay way. If they try to do something, then I'm going to attack them. However, because of this, it seems like that the DM didn't notice. This means that the DM didn't actually realize what they were trying to convey until initiative was already rolled, and at that point, it's too late because they're trying to focus on who's rolling, who's going first, what they need to roll for, and adding additional rules. It's too much at that point. They're going to likely do what humans naturally do and just take the path of least resistance and say, "Oh, that's not going to work." It also doesn't help that the player just got surprise wrong. Surprise isn't a round, it's a condition that a monster can have. Surprise only means that if combat starts and a PC or an NPC don't notice a threat, then their turn is skipped. Well, technically you are allowed to do a bonus action, but rules as intended, I'm just going to ignore that. A more mindful DM would likely ask the players if they had been readying an action before the start of combat. Now, what the player wanted isn't actually possible by regular rules. You can only ready an action on your turn, and if there's no turn order because you're not in combat, then you can't do it. So what? Is that just a player who doesn't understand the rules of the game and the DM is totally right? Let's try to look at it in a different way. The player in this situation is clearly trying to appeal to a certain fantasy of the showdown. They want their character to be hyper aware of the enemies around them and to be able to fight the second someone moves. Look at any Hollywood standoff, and this is what they're trying to go for. However, what ended up happening is that they rolled at the bottom of the initiative, so instead of instantly attacking, going for attack the moment someone moves an inch, everyone else around them is doing multiple attacks, moving 30 feet, and now everyone's away from them, and it's a bit awkward. Now, we can't always appeal to the player's fantasies. D&D is a game about winning and failing, and part of the excitement is the chance of failure. But from the player's perspective, they've made it clear that before combat even started, this is what they're going for. But yet, making sure to mention that their character pulled out their sword and is ready was basically the same as doing nothing at all. One thing I've heard online is that you should roll initiative without being hostile to each other and then just play out the roleplay in combat order until someone decides to make an attack. This would mean as long as the player isn't trying to ready a spell, then they can totally be readying an action when combat starts. I like this idea, but it has too many problems for me to feel comfortable. Firstly, there are many abilities and character classes that require being at the top of initiative or taking advantage of that first turn of combat, which gets complicated when combat starts in the middle of the initiative order and a couple turns after the first turn of combat. The other problem is rolling initiative will make the players feel that combat has to happen. Even if you don't make this the case, the fact is everyone is in combat and it'll make them feel like they're in combat. As well, it means of course the rest of the party don't want to do nothing on that turn, and that means everyone's going to be readying actions, and then it just becomes a whole complicated mess that didn't need to happen. So what's the best thing to do in this situation? Well, clearly, there's two paths that we can go down, and depending on the type of DM you are, one path will work better than another. The first way you can go about this is the rules lawyer way. A party is confronted by a group of enemies. One player character pulls out their sword and says, "Oh, if they try to do something, I'm going to attack them." The DM responds, "Oh, okay, so you're trying to ready an action?" The player says yes. The DM replies, "Okay, if you pull out your sword to be ready to strike, the enemies are probably going to take that as hostile, meaning that combat would just start as normal." The player responds, "Okay, then I won't do that." Just because a player is trying to appeal to a certain fantasy, that doesn't mean that you just have to let them do what they want. Appealing to the rules appeals to consistency, which, while it might frustrate the player from time to time, it also allows the player to know that no one is being singled out or getting some kind of advantage or disadvantage. This also comes with the downside of having to know all the rules very well, because if you make a mistake, it might look like you're going against your DMing principles, even if it was just as simple you forgot a rule. And don't even get me started on rules as written or rules as intended, or what do you do if you're going off the rules in the book and multiple people have different versions of the book. It gets complicated, and that's the whole point of the video in itself. So let's just look at our second option. The second option is to just say, screw the rules, I'll let the player do what they want. This time, the situation goes down as the party is confronted by a group of enemies. One player character pulls out their sword and says, "Oh, if they try to do something, I'm going to attack them." The DM responds, "Okay, if initiative starts, I'll let you do an attack before the start of anyone else's turn." At the end of the day, one extra attack in the party's favor isn't going to be the end of the world. Maybe if you're running a game that's very combat focused or meant to be very tactical or challenging, then an extra attack might hurt your game. Another thing you have to keep in mind is your players. If you let one player get a free attack in before combat, what happens if the rest of the party want the exact same thing? What if they want to do this for every combat that comes up? It's easy for players to both intentionally and unintentionally to take advantage of allowances made by the rule of cool. Then, if you decide to take back what you've previously allowed, then it might frustrate your players that you're no longer being consistent with what you said previously. So which choice is best? Well, I don't know your players. You know your players. Potential problems I brought up might not be something your players would ever do. Maybe your players would never have a problem with you changing what you previously allowed. Some players you might know will 100% take advantage of the fact if you allow certain things for rule of cool and know you can't do it that way in your games. But most importantly, only you know the type of game that you want to run. Being a DM is a lot of work, and there tends to be a lot of boring parts to it. So you have to make it as fun as possible for yourself, because no one else is going to do it for you. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it and you want to see more like it, please hit the subscribe button to be updated when more videos come out. I have a few larger concept videos that I have in mind, but I'm currently in the process of figuring out how I'm going to move across the province, so I'm waiting until after I finish that so they can be the best quality as possible. Thank you for your patience, thank you for watching, and yeah, this is the end of the video.